with that. Ryan Bradley, the executive director of Mississippi Commercial Fisheries United. Ryan, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking some time to join us. How are you this morning?
Good, good. Thank y'all for having me. I appreciate the invite, and it's a beautiful morning down here in on South Mississippi on the Gulf Coast.
Very good. Hopefully it stays that way. Now, before we get into the lawsuit, because we want to spend some time on the lawsuit, talk to us a little bit about Mississippi Commercial Fisheries United and specifically commercial fishing down on the coast. This is huge down there, isn't it?
It is. It is. Mississippi Commercial Fisheries United is our largest organization of commercial fishermen and seafood industry stakeholders, primarily down here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. They're involved in a number of different commercial fishing activity. You name it, our members do it. And they're all about working hard and putting seafood on people's dinner plates and providing that public access to the rest of the state and to the residents and tourists that come to Mississippi. And we want to put our best foot forward and showcase what is really some of the best seafood in the world right here in coastal Mississippi. And we're very blessed to have access to it and to share it with the rest of the public.
Well, and it is important. If you love seafood, you love everybody involved in this endeavor, because without them, you wouldn't have it. That's a fair statement, don't you think?
That's right. Without a commercial fisherman, we don't have fresh local seafood for sure.
Well, that brings us around to the lawsuit over the state's public oyster reefs. Tell us a little bit about that, what's going on. I know that Commercial Fisheries United is kind of leading the charge on this lawsuit, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Last week, May 1st, we filed a lawsuit along with 22 other commercial fishermen, oystermen, and really challenging a state law and the agency's regulations that's implementing these laws that's allowing up to 80% of our historic public oyster reefs to be leased to private entities. To make it more egregious, to be eligible to qualify, there's some really strict financial stability requirements that's really tough. Our fishermen have been through a lot of disasters with the oil spill and the Bonacare spillway. And, so to really put these onerous restrictions on who can lease these bottoms, and we don't believe that the private leasing is the correct path for the state at this time. And the great news is we're seeing our oysters come back since that spillway here of late. Tremendous recovery on our oyster reefs, a great success story. Certainly a lot of oysters coming back, and it's why we're fighting hard to maintain that public access for generations to come.
Now, you talked about some onerous restrictions it puts in as to who can lease. Can you talk about what those restrictions are as they're placed in law now?
Yeah, the law and the statute, and this was, the legislature has been working on this for several years now and trying to perfect it to get it to where it's legal to do this. And I don't think they've reached that point yet. But in the law here in 2024, Senate Bill 2648, they put in some criteria that references financial stability. And you have to submit a lot of bank records and documentation. You also have to have certainly a history in the fishery or the oyster growing business, which there's very few companies that have existing oyster leases. And then there's a whole host of other things you have to meet that really puts it out the purview and out the reach of our traditional fishermen who've relied on these reefs for their livelihood for many, many years, to where they can no longer access these reefs, and again, up to 80% of our public reefs. And I would note that a lot of taxpayer-funded money has gone to these reefs over the years for disaster recovery. So, we were certainly also in our complaint questioning the legalities of being able to transition those public use funds now to private ownership. So that's what we're looking at.
In the lawsuit, are you hoping to get some sort of temporary injunction at least to keep this from going into effect?
Yes, that is our primary goal. We think that once the leases are issued, that's going to be problematic for not only us but for the state. And so we did file a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction, and we'll be looking for a response from the state to see how we proceed.
Don't like to do this, but let's assume that this effort doesn't bear fruit for you and this goes into place exactly as it
Hmm.
is. What kind of impact is this going to have on commercial fishing and oyster fishing down on the Gulf
Hmm.
Coast?
Yes, well, the public's ability to access and harvest from publicly managed and hunt and fish on publicly managed wildlife areas, that's essentially what we're fighting for. And that is a state constitutional argument that we cite in our complaint. We reference that. And so it's just the fundamental right, not only to commercial fish in these areas, but to also recreational fish. And that's going to be a contentious issue. And so, we're looking for, uh, all the support we can. There's a lot of folks in the recreational fishing community that don't quite understand how this will impact them as well. But directly for our commercial fishermen, it'll all but put them out of business. They're only going to leave 20% of our public reefs. That's not enough viable ground for our guys to continue to make a reasonable living. And so, what it does is consolidate. Privatization in these fisheries always leads to consolidation. And so what we expect to see is just a tremendous amount of boats that won't be able to work anymore. And that's unfortunate. And one more thing, not only would it consolidate and limit the anybody's ability to go and be an oyster fisherman here in Mississippi, it would limit the public's ability to directly buy oysters right off the boat. And so that's something special that we have here in Mississippi. You can go down to the docks, you can buy the oysters right as they come off the boat. That would be a lot more difficult under this private leasing regime.
Well, and you talk about recreational fishing. We're
Mhm.
talking about 80% of those waters going under lease to another entity somewhere. That's going to kind of put
Mhm.
those areas, for the most part, off limits to recreational fishing, won't it?
I can't speculate on how the law will impact that, but certainly it is a concern of ours. Absolutely. And I think the law is currently, as it's written, is vague and ambiguous as to whether or not the how the recreational will be impacted.
When's your first court date on this lawsuit?
As of right now, I don't have any information as to when the court date will be set. All I can say is that I know our attorneys are in negotiations with the state attorneys, and they're currently working through all that to see. I do believe that we will be able to secure at least a temporary halt of these leases until we can have the courts review some of these complaints further. So I do think that'll happen. I'm confident in that. And so for the time being, I think we will see the leases halt. We were concerned. That's why we went ahead and filed soon. We were concerned that these leases would be issued in the near future. And so we're watching that closely. Absolutely.
Well, that's all you can do. It seems like everything these days is a race against time, and it kind of sounds like that's what you're dealing with right now with this whole issue.
Yes, it's a real travesty for these oyster fishermen. They've been through so much with all the different disasters, as we'd mentioned. We're finally starting to see our oysters recover and recover tremendously. And it's a great opportunity for our fishermen to get back to work and provide our communities with some really wonderful oysters. And we did have a little limited harvest in the fall of 2024 and 2025. And so we're looking at preserving this access because we're looking at a really good harvest for these guys come the fall of this year. And so hopefully no more calamities and disasters, and we can prevail here, and our guys can continue to work and make a living and provide for their families. That's what it's all about.
Was there a little bit of punching the air and a smile and a yes when they issued the decision that they weren't going to open the Bonnie Carey this time?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and I got to give thanks and kudos to all of our elected officials and our appointed officials that have been working hard on that issue. I think awareness has certainly been raised across the state about the detrimental impacts that Bonnet Spillway has on our coast, with our fishing communities, and it just spills over into so much more outside of the fisheries and the tourism and everything else. So it's a great that we avoided that this year. And, we still have a lot of work to do around that issue because we'll be right in the same situation again next spring, if we don't change the way we manage that river.
Ryan Bradley, Executive Director of Mississippi Commercial Fisheries United. We appreciate your time, man, and keep us updated on how this is going and how things unfold from here, okay?
Sure will. Thank you so much for having me. You have a great day.